Hey, hey Jerome, hi.
Hi Tony, how are you?
Thank you. I'm well, and I hope you're doing well as well.
Yes,
And
all good here as well. Glad to be here.
me the same. So, greetings to everyone who has joined today. This webinar. Welcome to the webinar. This webinar is obviously about analytics and about measuring, analyzing, and growing based on the data that we collect from analytics. And if you are already with us on this webinar, please drop us a hi in the chat, where whatever platform you are joining from, is it Instagram or is it LinkedIn? Please say hi to us. We want to hear from you. We want to know that you are here today with us. Let us know your name. Um, Send us your banking card. CVV. Just kidding. Okay, welcome. So let us give like another minute before people will join to this stream. And yeah, Jerome, how is the day today on your side?
Today's been good. Today's been good. Been pretty busy, but all good. I see Maria has already joined the call. Hi Maria.
Awesome.
Shalom as
Yeah,
well.
few people are in. Cool. So while we're waiting for others to join, my name is Tony, and I'm head of sales at Formata Agency. Formata Agency was founded in 2017, and we are a full stack digital agency, and we are delivering a bunch of services. It is marketing, it is design and branding, it is storytelling, copywriting, it is also development of applications. And yeah, we are delivering services since 2017 as an agency, but the core team, was working together on delivering excellent results. Actually, long before that, it was since 2012. And Jerome, what would be the story from your side?
Yes. I'm one of the co-founders of Converge. Converge is a marketing measurement and reporting platform. We basically help companies make sure that they track everything that happens on their websites, that they can trust the attribution and performance metrics they see in their ad platforms like Meta, Google Ads, etc., and that they can actually report on their marketing performance metrics.
Awesome. To me, leaning into the world of analytics is kinda learning something exciting, which is not on the surface, but it is getting into those insights, into getting much deeper below the surface to discover something that actually can change the direction of the whole spaceship that we're flying. Like it is like the ocean of data. How passionate are you about analytics, Jerome?
How passionate am I about analytics? Well, I would say pretty passionate. We've launched our analytics suite. I think now just over a year ago, and we've seen that there's so many problems that CMOs and heads of growth are having with it. What we typically see is that they all use a sort of a real-time dashboard with their basic KPIs, and everyone sort of has that, and that works. But then so many people struggle when they want to go a level deeper and when they want to do more granular insights. And then they just run into a whole bunch of data problems and they end up in an endless cycle of figuring out where certain discrepancies are coming from. And that's a problem I've developed a certain passion for sure, over the past few months, helping solving those problems for customers.
Okay, right. Cool. So, for those who are today with us on this webinar, on this stream, please drop a number from 1 to 10 about how passionate you are about analytics, because I'm not into analytics myself as a professional, but I do follow the analytics, the data from the social media where I participate as a contributor. And actually, I love those numbers. And I would say that I love analytics on the scale from 1 to 10, somewhere at the level of 7, but not as a professional. Right. So, Jerome, I believe you are somewhere at 9 or maybe 9.5. Are you?
Yes, I would tend to agree with that.
Okay. Awesome. I think we can actually try diving deeper into our webinar and to start. So, to give you guys some context, today, me as a head of sales at Formata Agency, digital agency, I'll be giving you some basics, some general context on how analytics works, why we need it, and how to actually approach it. But Jerome will be the one to be giving you some deeper insights, deeper details, and he will be also talking about the platform that he has co-founded, Converge, and it is the tool that is helping brands to actually perform well during high seasons, during peak seasons. And me, as a representative of a digital agency, I'm also working with brands in order to help them perform well during these high peak seasons. So, all right, let's dive into the exciting world and sometimes chaotic world of running large campaigns. Whether you are managing a social media post, navigating Google Performance Max, or launching meta campaigns, the challenges can stack up pretty quickly. One is juggling creatives to test, sales to boost, and new buyers to attract, all at the same time. It might feel like a tornado, but here's the exciting part. With the right analytics in place, you can turn that chaos into clarity. Let's explore how. Let's proceed to the next slide. Let's think about campaigns as more just about ads going live. A successful campaign starts long before launch and continues well after. It's a journey with four main stages. First, in a planning phase, you'll build in the foundation by creating assets, setting up campaigns, and aligning your team. One has to set up basic tracking. Think of it as your map. Use UTMs and optimize your website's performance to avoid getting lost. Once your campaign is live, analyzing metrics such as return on ad spend or customer lifetime value becomes key. This is where the numbers tell you what is actually happening. Finally, learning is all about stepping back, reviewing what worked and what didn't, and documenting those lessons to improve next time. Each stage feeds into the next, so getting any of this wrong can, can snowball into issues later. Okay, let's proceed to the next slide. Of course, things don't always go as planned. Common pitfalls can derail even the best laid plans. Think about on-site performance. If a successful campaign suddenly floods your website with traffic, it might slow down or even crash, the website. Inconsistent UTMs can make your traffic sources a mystery, turning your analysis into guesswork. Then there is the ever-present challenge of signal loss due to changing browser privacy changes, and it might slow down or even crash in such cases. And don't forget about the tendency to jump to conclusions with short-term analysis. Campaigns often need time to show the true impact. Anticipating these challenges and planning for them can save a lot of stress down the road. Okay, let's move on. Campaign planning. When it comes to planning, think of it as a planning for a long trip. You need to be thorough. Start by auditing your website's DevOps. Ensuring it can handle traffic surge isn't optional, it is absolutely critical. On the topic of CRO, having a user-friendly website can make all the difference. Don't let your poor design be the reason for poor conversions. They don't have to take the hit. For analytics, selecting the platform that is representing your business needs is vital. Accurate and flexible data is what will guide your decisions. And before launching, focus clear campaign goals, whether it's KPIs or OKRs. Defining this upfront ensures everyone is on the same page. Okay, let's talk about setting meaningful goals. When it comes to customer acquisition, understanding your costs is a game changer. Tracking ad conversion rates is equally important, and having benchmarks in place helps you spot trends and optimize them effectively. In terms of on-site performance, look at metrics like cart abandonment rates to see where you might be losing buyers. For revenue goals, using historical data to set targets is a smart move. If your targets are too aggressive, you'll end up frustrated. If they are too conservative, you'll likely leaving money on the table. With clear goals, you're setting your campaigns up for success. So, dear listeners, this was kind of the intro, kind of the context before giving the microphone to Jerome. And Jerome, you have the microphone. Please let us know how we can actually collect this data, track this data, and use this data. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Tony. Cool. So basically what you need to make sure that you can track data correctly and that you can ultimately end up with good insights and good decisions means that you need a good marketing measurement stack. There's basically three components that go into a marketing measurement stack, and they're all visualized here. First of all, you need conversion tracking. This is something that everyone's probably familiar with. It means that you track events on your website and that you send these to the marketing platforms that need them. These events can range from page view events, add to cart events, initiate checkout events, all the way to the purchase events, the ultimate conversions, which are the most important ones. And then you send these events to, for example, Google Analytics 4 to make sure that you can actually see analytics in there. You also send these events to your ad platforms. Think about Meta, Bing ads, Google ads, TikTok ads, Pinterest ads, etc. And then these ad platforms can use the events to ultimately attribute conversions to the different ads and creatives that they're serving. And that then results in in-platform ad performance metrics that form sort of the first piece of insights when it comes to measuring marketing performance. Then secondly, what you do is you will want to run your own attribution. And this is very important. The reason that you need your own attribution is because individual ad platforms will always only take into account the touch points that they've generated with a customer. So let's say someone buys your product after visiting your website 3 times. So the first time they visit your website through a Meta ad, the second time after seeing a Google ad, and then the third time after seeing a TikTok ad. And then in that third web session, they ultimately decide to buy something. What will happen then is Meta will report this conversion and attribute it to one of their ads. Google will do the same, and TikTok will do the same. But that's a bit biased. What you will want is you will want to choose a certain attribution model, whether it's a first touch, last touch, linear, or something else, and make sure that you consistently track and attribute these conversions to avoid sort of one conversion being counted more than once. So that's why you need your own attribution. And this is really important. And then lastly, you will basically want to consolidate all the metrics, whether it's your own attribution metrics or whether it's certain in-platform metrics, into a single dashboard or into multiple single dashboards that you own and that you control. Now, there's one key thing here that's really important, and that is the fact that this has to be unified. Conversion tracking and your dashboarding really has to be unified because otherwise so many discrepancies will creep into your reporting setup. If different data goes into the marketing platforms than the data that you ultimately use for your dashboards, it's very normal that things will not make sense. You'll have 5 different kinds of revenue numbers. You'll have 5 different kinds of session numbers, conversion rates, and that's really not what you want. So that's why it's important that sort of a single data collection piece of your infrastructure powers both your conversion tracking, your attribution modeling, and your dashboarding. And that's why it's called unified marketing measurements. All right.
Okay.
Then moving on to the next bit is I'll zoom in a bit on the tracking piece. So the first bit around conversion tracking. In conversion tracking, there's essentially 2 ways that you can go about it. First of all, there's client-side tracking, which is something I presume most of you are all familiar with. And then the second thing is server-side tracking. So client-side tracking is the oldest and most popular tracking method. It's when you install a pixel, for example, like a Meta Pixel or a Google Tag Manager script on your website. This is essentially just a piece of JavaScript code that you install in the header of your website, something that almost every e-commerce store or B2C brand has. What we typically see is that every single marketing destination, for example, an ad platform, they will all have their own tag. So you'll have a Facebook pixel, a Pinterest pixel, a TikTok pixel, a Google pixel, etc., all individually loaded on your website. And what happens is the way they track is when someone goes to your website and triggers certain events by, for example, buying something, it's at that point that these snippets are loaded and that they actually track and forward the events to the platforms that are installed with their pixels. Now, the problem with this client-side tracking setup is that it's very susceptible to certain browser tracking limitations. For example, if somebody has an ad blocker installed in their browser, the ad blocker will block the JavaScript snippets, which means that the pixels will never load and the events will never end up in your GA4 or in your meta. Also, if someone has very restrictive cookie banners, events will not be tracked. Or if someone just has slow internet and goes away to another page before the pixel has loaded, the event is also never tracked. And then lastly, it's also quite prone to bugs because it's all individual snippets that are a bit uncoordinated and just inserted one by different people and different times on your website. What we typically see is that these days, client-side tracking misses between 10 to 20% of the data. So there's quite a significant data loss, especially for larger brands who really want to understand how different channels, etc., are performing and want to compare different things. This is a big problem. Now, there's actually quite a simple solution to it, which is called server-side tracking. What that basically means is that you pull data directly from your order backend. So let's say you run a Shopify store or a Magento store. Even though you can't track everything in the browser, every single order that is placed on your website will end up in your order backend, which means that if you just integrate with that order backend, you're always guaranteed to track 100% of the events. And that's completely separate from any browser tracking limitations. So it's always consistent. There's a few other additional advantages, like for example, you will not have any duplicate tracking anymore, and you can easily add custom events, things like that. But the main reason people use server-side tracking is just to make sure that they don't have any data loss anymore and that they just track 100% of their conversions. Now, moving on to the next bit here, the way that you can check whether you actually have significant data loss is by doing an audit of one of your ad platforms, for example. And this is something that we do quite often for our customers. This is an example of a slide that we usually include in one of our audits, and it's an audit of the Meta platform. What we typically check here, and this is for Shopify brands, is what percent of the orders that are in Shopify were ultimately sent into Meta. And here you can see sort of typical results where about 20% of the data is being missed. As you probably know, Facebook or Meta tracks in two different ways, one through the pixel and then secondly through the conversions API. Usually we see that the conversions API tracks a bit more for standard Shopify connections, but still loses some data as well. And this is because it's also just susceptible to the same browser tracking limitations. This can also sometimes unveil that a cookie banner is not configured properly. And then there's a few other things that you'll want to look into, such as event matching score and whether you're tracking new customer purchases separately. And that I'll cover on the next slide. So event match quality score is something that is often described a bit vaguely, but it's actually really important for your business. What it basically means is the higher your score, the more accurate Meta or any other ad platform will be able to attribute events to certain ads and to certain users of their platform. So how does that really work? Let's say you send a purchase event into Meta with certain parameters. Let's say you include the email address. And then Meta can link this email address to an Instagram account. Then Meta knows, okay, this Instagram user has bought something on your website. Now, what Meta also knows is whether this Instagram user has actually seen an ad or clicked on an ad. And if that's the case, when they clicked on a certain ad and they bought something, then Meta can simply attribute that purchase to that ad. So that's how attribution works. That's how these ad platforms all work. They link the event to a user on their platform, and then they use the information they have about whether that user clicked or viewed a certain ad to attribute the purchase to that ad. And this can not just only happen through email addresses. It can also happen through a combination of a phone number with a first name, a last name, or a certain cookie. So really, the more parameters you send to these ad platforms, the higher your event match quality score and the better your attribution will be, the more available data you can send to the platforms, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really important to get right. All right, moving
Absolutely.
on. Perfect. Moving on to the next one here is about sending additional events. What we typically see is that people use their digital ads to acquire new customers much more than just retargeting existing customers. Usually those are retargeted through email campaigns or SMS campaigns, for example. And especially when you're in a very high volume period, like what's the case right now with Black Friday coming up, you will want to know how much you're paying for a new customer and not just want to look at your CPA in isolation. And the way that you can do it is by simply sending a separate event into these ad platforms, which is not a purchase event, but a new customer purchase event. And that basically works just the same as the purchase event, but it only includes purchases from people who buy for the first time. And if you then create a CPA metric for the new customer purchase event, you get your cost per new customer, which is simply your customer acquisition cost, directly visible in your ad platforms. And this allows you to sort of scale up campaigns that actually acquire new customers effectively, and not just scale up campaigns who keep retargeting people who maybe would have bought anyway because you're running a lot of discounts during this period. Cool.
Okay.
You can also do the same with subscribers, by the way. So if you're a subscription brand, you'll probably want to separately send a subscription started event into your ad platforms so you can measure the cost per subscriber and then sort of optimize that, taking into account the expected LTV for a certain subscriber. All right, so that's it when it comes to tracking. The next bit will be about, so here maybe before moving on, this is an overview of how a good tracking setup looks like. And this is an example of how the Converge platform approaches it. What you essentially see on the left side is the data collection. So you will have server-side tracking that integrates directly with your order backend and tracks purchases, etc. And then you will have a pixel snippet that collects events like page views, add to carts, things like that really originate in the browser and that you have to track in the browser. What then will happen is that data gets centralized. You sort of make sure you re-identify as many users as possible. You enrich events with parameters you've captured in the past. You can run attribution, things like that. And then ultimately you send them back into the platforms that you use for your marketing. And there's a bunch of advantages. For example, in Meta, I already mentioned this, you can improve your event mesh quality. In Google Ads, you can automatically optimize your enhanced conversions. In GA4, you make sure that 100% of your purchases are there. You make sure that there's less direct and unassigned traffic. There's a bunch of benefits associated with just making sure that your tracking is really set up correctly here.
Okay, John,
Right.
if I may ask.
Sure.
So as I can see, collecting data is not either or client side and server side. It can be both at the same time, right?
Yes. So there's only one event that you can track service side, and that's your conversions. That's your purchases, because you have an order backend. But other events like page view or product view, those events inherently originate in the browser. So you always need to track them in the browser. You don't have sort of a backend list of people who view the page. That's just not something that happens. So server-side tracking always refers to the conversions. And that's also totally fine, because those are also the only events where you really want to have an exact count, because those are the events that will power your ad performance metrics, your CPAs, your ROAS, and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So moving into the reporting piece, there's essentially two parts to reporting. First of all, there's the real-time dashboard that people will check multiple times a day. On the right-hand side, you can see the one that we have in Converge. It's a pretty simple dashboard with sort of your main metrics, a comparison period, and maybe a drop-down if you want to see a certain trends. It's very fast and snappy, and we have some users who consistently check this more than 50 times a day, just because it's really helpful to check what's going on during the day, to see how you're trending, to see if anything is going wrong, if you're pushing new changes to the website, things like that. What is typically included here is like ad spend, revenue, the number of new customers you've acquired, and then a bit more below, blended and CPA is a really important one. That's sort of the total number of cash, or the total cash amount you're paying for every new customer that you've acquired during a certain day. And this is a very real metric. you're not sort of dependent on any attribution model here because it's blended. It just takes into account your total ad spend and the total amount of new customers you've acquired, and it divides the ad spend by the number of new customers you've acquired. So if this is trending in the right direction, you're always doing something right. And if this is going red, then definitely something's going wrong. So the nice thing about this dashboard is it's very high level, but there's a very high level of trust. It's not a proxy metric. It's an actual metric that tells you about how your business is doing. Now, the reason why you will want to have this on top of the same data that you use to send events into your marketing platforms is because you will also have, like, as you can see at the bottom, add to cart rates, conversion rates. Maybe we'll also pull in some meta metrics, some Pinterest metrics, some Google Ads metrics. So you just want to make sure that everything stays consistent, so there's no suspicious discrepancies that you need to spend a lot of time on. That's why it's all powered by the same data. Now, obviously, this is only a high-level view, and a lot of brands, especially larger ones, will want to have much more granular analysis for, let's say, a weekly review, a monthly review, or a quarterly review. And that's how we end up with sort of the custom dashboards, which are covered in the next section. So this is also an example of a custom dashboard that a lot of our customers use. You have sort of set numbers. You can view certain trend lines. You can have cohort analyses. And then at the bottom right, you can see tables. We see that most marketeers tables for 90% of sort of their efforts. It has much more information density. Right. Moving on. I see I might have reconnected, Tony. Have you been able to hear me, or was I cut off for a bit?
We lost you for like 5 seconds, which is okay. It was the end of the previous slide, so I believe we can continue with this one.
Okay, perfect. So one other part of running sort of more granular reporting is comparing different attribution models. And this is something that we very typically see. So for a certain campaign, you will want to know whether that campaign contributes to top of funnel or bottom of funnel. You will want to know the first touch attribution results, the last touch attribution results, and maybe also participation models, because that's what corresponds to what the ad platforms themselves are doing. So it's very important if you're running sort of multiple different channels, you're doing more complex experiments, you're running at a larger scale. It's really important to understand how these different attribution models work and how they're interlinked with each other. And what we see that really good CMOs are good at is actually taking these models that all sort of give a different view of the reality and understanding what that actually means for their business if certain metrics diverge or converge from each other. Cool. Then the next bit will be about tables. I already mentioned that we see that tables usually form 90% of sort of really good CMOs reporting stack. And the reason for that is that tables are really, really powerful. You can essentially visualize different columns in sort of a funnel. For example, the way you see it here is you have your spend, CPM, clicks, CPC, CTR, and then ultimately your conversions and your ultimate marketing performance metrics. What we see is that CMOs usually have this table, but then duplicate it like 20 times. They have a separate one for each channel. They have a separate one for each market that they advertise in. They sometimes even have a separate one for each product. For example, we have a customer that sells suits, but also sort of shirts. The suits are much more expensive than the shirts. So it's a completely separate business line. It's also separate customers. It's completely separate economics as well. So a good CPA for a suits purchase is not a good CPA for a shirts purchase. That would be much too high because shirts are much lower in AOV. So what they do is they tag all their campaigns with like underscore suits or underscore shirts. And then they basically split the reports completely in half. And they have completely separate performance dashboards for each product line. And this is really an unlock because if you have products for which you can afford a higher CPA, you should definitely be just spending more on those if it works well. And you don't want that to be cluttered with overall CTA. Cool. Okay. So that's product. And then there's also finally campaign type. The first one is sort of a great example. That's branded versus non-branded. I think most of you will know if you're running Google Ads that branded campaigns tend to have sometimes slightly inflated performance metrics, whereas non-branded campaigns usually have a bit lower performance metrics. But the branded campaigns usually target people who already had some intent. So the value of those conversions is usually a bit lower as well. What's really nice here is that you could just take a separate table for your branded performance and a completely separate table for your non-branded performance. This just helps you sort of see through all the vagueness and just make sure that you properly understand how each of these completely separate campaign types are running, even though they're on the same platform on Google Ads. All right, that's it from the reporting and measurement side of things. Back to you, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Jerome. It was insightful. Today's webinar is kind of a learning curve for me because I've been preparing to the webinar. I've been learning more about analytics, and um, it is kind of an art that one has to master in case he wants his business to to thrive. And in this case, you know, working the ability to be working um, consistently and congruently, uh, joining the data from all the platforms that you are collecting the data from, and the platforms where you advertise, and reviewing this data in a single pane of glass in a such convenient way that you have just presented. I believe it is a game-winning approach that everyone has to consider, right?
Yeah, that's the way we view it too. I think the way you should think about it is it's a replacement for the modern data stack. I think we've all heard about the modern data stack, where you have separate event collection, then a data warehouse, then transformations, then sort of custom data pipelines. And this works, but it's really hard to measure, sort of to maintain and to set up. It takes a lot of engineering resources. It takes a lot of time to maintain. If something breaks, it takes a lot of time to fix. And we've seen that even for very large companies, like public companies that we work with, they all still have a data warehouse and it still has its place. But for optimizing your digital marketing, you just need something that does it all at once, that has proper quality assurance, proper quality controls, and that just makes sure that you can always trust your metrics. And with the modern data stack, that's very, very hard to do because the marketeers constantly rely on engineers, and engineers usually don't have sort of the marketing background to spot it if there's a technical problem introducing a certain discrepancy.
Okay. So, Jerome, I'm totally sold on the ideas that you were sharing with us, and probably someday I will become a customer of yours as well. But as of now, I will just give us the outro from this presentation before we skip to actually questions and answers. So most likely we will have some questions. So Jerome, buckle up. I believe you will be the one to answer those in terms of analytics. Okay.
That's good.
Okay. So when campaign is done, it's time to take a step back and reflect. Start by asking yourself key questions. How did sales perform? Which creatives connected the most with your audience? What channels delivered the best results? And which products or services were the biggest revenue drivers? This phase is all about figuring out what worked, what didn't, and how to make your next campaign even better. Skipping this step is like leaving money on the table. Okay, now we're talking about documenting the results. Okay, so let's talk documentation best practices. This part is often overlooked, but it's critical for long-term success. For instance, take a close look at your creatives, what layouts, branding elements, colors resonated the most. Also, evaluate the effectiveness of discounts. Did the coupons or site-wide sales delivered the results that you wanted? On the buyer behavior side, customer lifetime value uh, might stack up with the customer acquisition cost, and this has to correlate. And don't forget to review your ROAS to understand return on ad spend, to understand your overall profitability. A detailed record of these insights becomes your playbook for future campaigns. Okay, the next slide, please. Finally, let's discuss the timelines for a bit. A structured schedule is the backbone of many successful campaigns. About a week before launching, do the CRO and DevOps audits, only then go live. A week after the campaign ends, start your retrospective and document all the findings. 2 months post-campaign, follow up with returning buyers, and launch another round. This kind of timeline ensures that you are not just reacting to results, but strategically planning for what is next. So this is, I believe, everything we had for today from our theoretical part. Jerome, thank you for listening to me as well. Was I quite a profound analytics lecturer here today?
Yes, it was very nice. It was great to be here.
Okay, awesome. So, dear audience, dear listeners and viewers, thank you for being today with us. It is now the best time to actually ask us some questions. And before you do that, while you are doing that, I have a question to Jerome as well. Um, at what budgets for marketing campaigns does it make sense to start using Converge? For example, if I would be launching like ads with Meta and Google at the budget of £2,000, let's say, would it make any sense to use Converge?
Would that be £2,000 a month?
Yes, £2,000 a month
Yeah.
for a marketing campaign.
Yeah. I think if your total ad spend is below 10,000 a month, it might just be a bit expensive because there is a price tag associated with it.
Okay.
Now, if you advertise across different channels, then sort of the value of it already goes up. If you know you have tracking problems and you know you can't trust your metrics without sort of a proper solution, then it also makes sense to use it. But if you suffer from the typical data loss of 10 to 20% and you're only spending 2,000 a month, then I would probably say just keep doing that and just use the extra money to maybe spend a bit more and get a bit more information and a bit more signal about what's working. But really, as soon as you spend more than 10,000 a month, it becomes a total no-brainer to use something like this because your ads are just already going to perform better in the first place because we're going to be sending more data into the ad platforms. You're going to be much more confident in your ad performance metrics. And also, if you want to run any analysis, it's just going to be done very quickly. So you'll not lose a lot of time trying to set up custom dashboards, things like that.
Okay. Is it okay? We have a question. I'm reading this for you. Jerome, does server-side analytics help in any way to work around restrictive cookie policies?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a controversial one. Essentially, technically, it could work around these policies 100%, but legally, you should not do that. The way that a lot of our customers do it, and they all choose it themselves, it's really something that every brand really discusses with our council usually, is what they do is they adhere to the cookie policies, but then what they can sometimes do is they can still send server-side data into the platforms, but strip it from certain PII, so personally identifiable information. And that way, it can be compliant with legislation, but you can still recover more signal than you would if you would not have server-side tracking. But then again, like it's not legal advice. You definitely need to discuss this with your counsel to make an actual decision on this because it's changing all the time as well.
It looks like we have answered this question for Anton. Jerome, I also have a question. Is it easy to set up to start working with you? Because
Sorry?
to me, it looks like, is it easy to set up and start working with you with Converge? Because to me, it looks like a lot of data streams and data points. It is like too much.
It's actually quite all right. It depends on how your e-commerce store is set up. If you're a Shopify store, you're probably going to be set up in 5 to 10 minutes just to connect the data to Converge. If you then want to set up connections with your app platforms, it's about 5 minutes per connection. So you can be up and running in an hour or so. Now, if you have a fully custom or a headless front end, for example, Then you need to implement some of the converge events custom as well. That takes a bit more time, and then it would be a few hours. But we offer a lot of tools to make this very easy. If you have misimplemented something, we automatically throw a warning. We actually work with a lot of custom stores as well. And we have a lot of functionality that makes the life of the engineers implementing it easier. So I would say, like, yes, if you have a lot of custom events and you have a custom site, there's no way around that. But if you compare it to setting up any other tracking for those types of websites, it's still going to be much easier. And then if you have a Magento, a Shopify, or a eCommerce or something like that, then it's like a few clicks. It's a few minutes to connect every bit.
Okay, okay, Jerome. Now, once set up, for example, it was a Shopify store, and we spent
Cool.
like up to 10 minutes to actually start using Converge. Do we have access to historical data, or there should be some time frame after which we will be able to assess and evaluate the findings that Converge has provided?
Sorry, you just broke up there at the very beginning. Did I understand correctly that you're wondering if you install Converge, whether there's also historical data flowing into the platform?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yes. So for order events, that is historically populated. Yes. So you will be able to view all your revenues from the past. You will also be able to view all the metrics that we get from your ad platforms from the past. So you will get your CPCs, your CPMs from Meta, from Google. We'll pull those in. You'll have that historical data as well. The only data that you will not have historically is like page views and at cart events, because those are sort of tracked in real time on your website and they're usually not stored anywhere. So only that data would only be available from the time you actually start using Converge.
Okay, okay, awesome. I'm out of the questions, and it doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat. So to anyone who is listening, we're encouraging you to get in touch. So you can reach out to any one of us. It can be on LinkedIn or to our corporate accounts. And whether you have a question in regards to using Converge, or whether you need help of a professional team of marketers and designers and developers, you can reach out to Fermata. So we're here to help. We're here to chat, and this conversation with us, with Jerome, wouldn't cost you nothing except for your time. So um, we're inviting you to have this conversation with us. Jerome, are you encouraging people to do so?
Definitely. If anyone has any doubts about their marketing measurement setup and wants someone to get a quick look at it before Black Friday, feel free to just get in touch. And we're always happy to help. And thanks for hosting us today, Tony. I think it was very insightful.
Yeah, Jerome, it was a delight to see you, to talk to you. And we're looking forward to talking to you again.